I want to speak a little bit about my insights from my experience in the last 2 years. Historically, the first time I got to China was 1992. The third flight of El Al, I came with my future wife for a month without a hotel, without any program, and for a whole month, 24 hours a day, going by train, Beijing, Xi'an, and we managed somehow to do this trip. My wife didn't agree to go back to China until a year ago when I took her to Shanghai. Such a trauma was for her since that time. She was used to Europe to go, but the China of 1992 was very difficult for her. I was in the army, so for me it was okay, but it was really different. Actually, I got back to China only in April 2015, about 2 years ago. I don't have a part in Israel joining. My contribution is I was in South Korea. I presented Israel in the annual meeting of the Inter-American Bank Governors. And then in the middle of the night, I got a phone call from the CEO of the Ministry of Finance, and I was just sleeping. And they said, "What is this bank? And why the Chinese spent $150 million on this bank? What is it good for?" And then this directive came from the Prime Minister, from the Foreign Office. I said to them, it's very important, and $150 million for the Israel Bank is no problem, jokingly. And then why did I say they'll pay? Because in 93 there was an agreement between the Treasury and the Israel Bank that we have to increase the quota of Israel in the World Bank. And Israel didn't have a foreign currency, so there was an agreement in 63 that the Israel Bank will buy the shares of the World Bank, and the export will go from the Ministry of Finance to the Bank of Israel. And since then, the Bank of Israel always bought the shares of Israel in the World Banks. When the EBRD was established, they bought the shares, and he was the savior. So I said it makes sense. There's another bank. Israel should go in. Israel Bank will buy the shares. I went back to sleep, and then I spoke the next morning with the governor of the bank. She said, "No, we're not buying it. It's not good for Madeira." I came back to my wife and I said, "Surely we have to take it from our bank account, $150 million. Nobody else is going to pay." Finally, we found the money in the Treasury, and at the end of 2016, the Ministry of Finance bought back from the Bank of Israel all the shares, and we today are in the 4 banks of Israel in this bank, and I think it's a good thing. Part of it is the experience I had in the establishment. So after this phone call, when I came back, I found out that there was a resolution of the Prime Minister, and Israel was a chief negotiator. And then I was appointed to be the chairman, and then this circus started. Every month somewhere else in the world, there was sitting and intervention between countries in Asia. The last time, I think it was towards 2015, it was in Jakarta. Israel doesn't have diplomatic relations, but I found myself in Jakarta with a bodyguard in the hotel, and that was the last conference of this bank. So in this establishment process, it was 57 countries. Most of them sent their treasury representative, and I think somebody came also from the central bank. But in this process, it was agreed upon the a convention of the bank and the policy, and on 15th January 2016, the bank opened its gates, and with a quite difficult step, we managed in 2 weeks after we signed. Actually, Matan, you signed it, you remember, in June 2015, right? Yes. Now we have to put it to the ratification of this convention. 2 weeks we enacted the bill, a law, from submitting the paper to the committee until the last stage, and I came to Beijing 15 January as the Israeli representative, and with a receipt of the SWIFT, we transferred $30 million. So the moment the bank, it was also something interesting, we managed to be members. The problem is that when we transferred the money with the SWIFT, the bank didn't have accounts yet. They were Bank of China, something on the way, somebody took a commission of $20. We had to give them 30 million fixed. He said, no, but the $20 less came. Do you manage to pay it? Can you pay it from your pocket? I said, I don't have it on me for a moment. Anyway, it all ended well. We became friends. So until today, we invested $90 million in this bank. Every year, you have to invest 30. And now let's go back to my presentation. I worked hard on it. I hope it works. Let's see if we're going to hear. Thanks to Bill Gates, he always used to help us. Give it a chance. No, it's nothing to do with the microphone. It's we'll try to see. Can you hear it?
Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is off to a very good start. In the first year of 2016, we have been able to achieve a great progress in setting up the basic policies and extend our lending programs to the borrowers. This has led to the strong...
הדבר הזה הוביל לתמיכה מרובה ממדינות רבות ברחבי העולם. לכן אנחנו הגדלנו את החלק שלנו בבנק. אנחנו מחויבים לקדם כלכלה ירוקה. זה דבר חשוב מאוד למדינות מתפתחות לפתח את הכלכלה ללא טביעת אצבע. כאשר מדובר על פרויקטים ספציפיים, אנחנו רוצים להבטיח שהפרויקטים האלה יהיו בני קיימא מבחינה כלכלית, ושהפרויקט ייתן תוצאות ירוקות לצרכנים. אנחנו מחויבים לגייס משאבים מטעם המגזר הפרטי כדי לסייע למדינות לפתח את התשתיות, ואנחנו מאמינים שאם נעבוד עם המגזר הפרטי, נוכל להשיג תוצאות באותן מדינות מתפתחות בתמיכה מלאה של המגזר הציבורי. ההשקעה שלנו בטבע תהיה מועברת גם למקומות אחרים, בגלל שאנחנו מדברים על סחר בין גבולות וגם בין אנשים לאנשים. אסיה נהנית מצמיחה מהירה מאוד בשנים האחרונות, ולאסיה יש אוכלוסייה צעירה עם עתיד מבטיח. כמובן שעדיין יש הרבה מאוד אתגרים קשים, אבל בסך הכל אני מאמין שבמדינות אסיה, בממשלות, במוסדות, במגזר הפרטי ובאנשים, בבני העם, כולם עובדים קשה כדי להגשים את חלומותיהם, ואני מאוד אופטימי לגבי העתיד של אסיה. Then what is this bank then? This bank is actually the most significant Asian institute that Israel is a member of. It's we're going to be $100 million, but only 20 million out of it is money that we put cash. The rest is the commitment of the countries. We started in January 2016. Israel was one of 57 countries establishing the bank, and today, after all the process is finished, they will accept other countries, and it will come to 80 countries. Our share of the capital is the largest than all the other members, 75%. Our share in voting is a bit higher. In this bank has 12 directors, and the privilege to appoint directors goes by vote. So 9 are regional countries. Regional means the UN definition, so Israel is regional, and 3 others, countries from Europe, Africa, Latin America, or North America. And therefore, states have to make a coalition, except for China, India, and Russia, who have enough power and shares and votes to appoint their own directors. All the others, in order to appoint a director, they have to become groups. And in that respect, Israel is in the group that is led by South Korea. And our representative is South Korean. At the moment, we have Mongolia and Uzbekistan with Israel, as opposed to the 0.75% of the capital share. So South Korea has 3.5%. According to the rotation agreement within the group, we have the right to appoint a replacement director who participates in the meeting until the first 2 years. And half the time, this replacing director is half the time, and then it will be shared by Uzbekistan and Mongolia. We can also appoint advisors who can also participate in the meetings of the board. Until yesterday, I was the replacement director on behalf of Israel, and now I left. And the moment he's appointed, the economic attaché in Beijing from Israel, he is going to be appointed, because now we have a consulate in Beijing, so he's going to be the replacement director, and until June 8, 2018, when we'll give this post to a Mongolian or Uzbekistan representative. The professor spoke about the economy of scene, but these data from 2014, when there was a change. Look at the level of investment in China for many, many years. It's now very high. The whole ethos of Chinese growth is based on great investments. I put Japan to compare, but not in the same years. Japan from 70 until the end of 90s, Japan as well, when it was growing fast, needed a lot of investments. And in a certain point, too much investment creates a situation that in order to continue growing in the same way, then the dollar starts going down. You cannot preserve it for too long. One of the objectives of the government in China is to maintain the rate of growth. And this engine of investment cannot do it for a long time, but that's already the ethos of growth. And no wonder that the bank that China established wants to invest in infrastructure, not just development. You know, in the world they do many other things, but they want to focus on infrastructure. That derives out of the analysis that all the multilateral banks are part, that there's a great lack in investment in Asia. In China, it's the opposite. Today we think there's too much investment in infrastructure. And then we ask the question whether really the bank is the tool of the Chinese government to export its capacity of manufacturing to the world. So this bank is small, although it sounds very big, vis-a-vis the manufacturing capacity of China. So it's not the main motive. I think one of the main motives is the lack of representation of China in financial establishment. You know, Israel's power in the bank, it's a function of the size of economy. There's a formula when you establish these institutes. Every country is represented and pays money according to its relative size. It's not that we have maybe a bigger weight than other countries in Europe, because the division is done once in the region and then out of the region. And as I said, 75% of the shares in the region, that's where we are. But China, who joined these institutions with the size of the Chinese economy that grew in leaps and bounds, creates a situation that in all these lateral institutes, America was at the head, and they didn't get shares when China wants to join. And one of the things is that these banks, like the World Bank, the Inter-American Bank, and others, are talking about the need to increase their own shares. That, and also the monetary fund, for years was stuck in the American Congress. The American couldn't, even before Trump, they couldn't participate in this process because of internal politics, created a situation that China cannot reach to its representation, and that's their motive, to establish their own bank. And of course, in AID, it has more than 28% of the voting power. All the main decisions have to go over 75%. And of course, the two other countries that are here are not present in the bank. Then it's the biggest mistakes of the American administration. And they thought, or even during Obama, they wanted to motivate, to prevent the allies of America from joining this bank because they're competitors, but that was broken in 2015 when Britain came in, and then all the Europeans, and we came in the last minute. On that night, yes, of the phone call, that's it, exactly. And we also came in, and since then other countries joined as well. Canada just recently joined, so the number of the external countries is growing all the time. What is the situation now? All in all, the bank, what's amazing in this process, and that's typical of China, they don't waste time. The initiative was in 2014. Let's say that we jumped on the wagon in April 2015 to open the gates of the banks in January 2016. Nobody else could do it. It's only an institute that the Chinese are doing it. The person you saw before, who it's at the end could decide on the target. It looked completely unreasonable, but it did. Sometimes it's not even pleasant. You know something, the style of management, it's not very pleasant, especially to our European friends. You know, they talk, they discuss, they debate. There's a strategy of the bank that happened recently, but they did a very nice compromise with NGOs and all sorts of consultations, videos. Physically at the end, because of internal political considerations of Germany, they had a problem with supporting non-renewable energy, and then we went ahead, but it took a long time, and the process is that the strategy worked. All in all, the bank in the first year gave $1.7 billion loans, very small number of employees. There are 83 employees. There's supposed to be 150, a lot of consultants, and only 28%, I think, third are Chinese. All the others come from many, many other countries. The president is Chinese. All the vice presidents, 50, nobody is Chinese. There's an Indian, Indonesian, German, French, and I forgot one, I think. There's a Pakistani, I think. So this is actually the picture. And there's a real focus on bringing people from all over the world. It's not so easy in Beijing, and people are not very enthusiastic to go to Beijing or to go live there, if you talk about other places. The bank works systemically to consolidate its strategy, but it's while moving. They didn't wait for 2 years to see the strategy and the policy documents and whatever, and to that. But typical to China, immediately they started working with whatever they had on the ground, and what really helped was the cooperation agreements. And in the beginning it said that this is a competition, the Americans said, and then they said, let's verify that it maintains the international standards. So they have a cooperation now with the World Bank and the European major bank. And actually most of the loans that you saw are co-investments, namely the bank joined projects that were developed by the bank that was established by the States and Japan and the World Bank and others. So as I said, actually they consolidate the strategy, but there's also an opportunist approach in order to succeed, to start investing money. All these investments were not always part of the strategy, but what's important is actually the mandate of the bank. Lean, clean, and green multilateral bank. Link, clean, and green, that's the slogan of the president. It's a bank that has to be lean, And one of the criticism about multilateral banks is that they have bureaucracy and mechanisms, and all the processes take a long time. And therefore, by the way, as opposed to all the other banks, and the president was a vice president in the central bank, and he has a lot of experience, as opposed to all the other banks, where the director lives and works on behalf of the bank in the headquarters. In this bank, they decided that there's no such thing. The director convenes in Beijing once every 3 months, and mostly in a video conference. And there you don't have this whole headquarters of directors and representatives from the World Bank and other banks that have to go to China. Saves a lot of money. Clean is also very important. And the president focuses on the zero tolerance for corruption. And they have to live up to the standards. And of course, green. A bank talks about investment that will help the environment. Part of the processes when they established the bank was the environmental strategy. All these things are done. Many consultants came from all sorts of multilateral banks, and they contributed of their own experience. What does the bank do in 2017? They develop, on the one hand, the strategy. On the other hand, they build the bank, bring more and more people. There's not enough human infrastructure or local in order to support. They have to do it as you go. And what's very important is the bank got today a triple A. The multilateral banks usually they want to get the highest scoring rating in order to fundraise for low and give it to the countries for a low price. And a great effort of the bank to go to the rating agency, and today Moody's gave them highest interest rate, AAA. And I must tell you that when you look at who's behind that bank, who are the shareholders, and they're committed, and this happened in spite of the downgrading of China, which is the biggest shareholder. But the agency was very impressed with the bank itself, and also the level of management and the governance of the bank. They all have AAA? Yes, they all have AAA. If to conclude, actually, if we look naively, perhaps we can say that in the world, the realization of the Chinese economic power in the international arena can be done by very short motives. They want to realize their capacity, they want to get resources for China, and then they exert their power in Africa, and they will ensure that the commodities that the Chinese need Ghana for that. Maybe this is a point of view which is very narrow. Of course they have interest and they exert their power, but here I think actually there's another aspect of the Chinese intervention, and that's a multilateral view. How does China, which is really the biggest superpower, is now more significant in the multilateral institution or environment? And so the very narrow interest of China tallies and adapts itself to the world. It doesn't only serve China, it serves China to become a leader in the multilateral environment that around it has some 79 other countries and joint goals that are not just for the narrow interest of China itself. I think today the bank is perceived like as a window of the capability of China to manage this institute in international standards. People are thinking whether a different regime mainly could have done it better, but what about China? Can they actually live up to the standards by the other institutes? So this is a test case, and there's a big focus on that. And if this lean model will succeed, It's not so simple, to create those qualities with much less input. That will challenge the other multilateral institute. The World Bank is already 70 years. It's already stale, although it has a very important role. And finally, I think it's right, from our point of view, the relations that we have with the Treasury in China, and they represented China with their ministers and other directors. Our relationship with them is much warmer today and tight than it was in the past. We have almost current connections with them, and we feel it in other topics as well. And maybe you'll hear about it later. There's a Chinese support in our efforts in the other multilateral arenas in the world, of course in Asia as well, and it's very important. And I think that this is really a forum for meeting with people that we usually don't talk to all the time. I have a conversation with the Saudi director when we meet in the board, or manager with somebody from Indonesia or somebody from Pakistan. I can dialogue with them, and this, of course, has also perhaps another contribution. I don't understand diplomacy and external relations, but maybe it helps us in the world. So this is it. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're now going to go